Good evening, everyone. In our last few minutes before the end of Shabbat, I am so thrilled to be welcoming you all. My name is Sarah Chandler, and I'm here live. We're still on Zoom, but some of us are in person thanks to modern science and vaccinations, etc. And we are here to celebrate the publishing of this amazing book. And I am so thrilled. And in just a moment, we will welcome our guest author. And before we do that, I want to give us an opportunity to take a moment and do a little bit of time travel. Some of you have heard me say that the study that we do in Romemu Yeshiva, I am also the director of Romemu Yeshiva, is like time travel. We get to go through different centuries, different time periods, meet different characters, and go on this journey together. So I want you to take a moment. I want you to think about when you were young, younger than you are now, when you were little. And think about when you would imagine yourself growing up, studying, having a career, working. What did you dream? What did you dream that you could be? So I'm going to pause and just allow everyone just to have that experience, time travel to your earlier self. Okay, and just hold that image in your mind, hold that idea in your mind. This book touched my soul. And one of the reasons is because it's about an animal, a dove. One of the reasons because the main character is a girl that I identify with very much. And it's a girl who loves books, and it's a girl who loves Torah. And it's a girl who came to run a yeshiva, a house of study, which is what I now do in 2021. And actually, in 2021, there aren't that many people who run yeshivas who are not men. And so it is very exciting to see this book and this story. And so as a way of connecting ourselves to Osnat and to this story, we're going to do a little mini survey, and we're going to see it in the chat. I want you to type in up to 3 things that you imagined that you might take on as your career path as a child. And I'm going to encourage you, try to keep them to one word so that we can see if there are multiple people who had the same one, they'll pop up on the screen together. So you're going to just go to the chat in your Zoom, and where it says menti.com, you're just going to click on that link there. And you can type in up to 3 things, 3 possible career paths. Singing rabbi up there, figure skater, teacher, spy. Ooh, I like that one. Writer, artist, doctor. And so even if we can't necessarily go back and visit our child selves and tell them what we will be one day, or what of the many careers we might have one day, we do have the opportunity to go on a journey in time to meet Osnat and to hear her story and to bring this story to the young ones and people of all ages in our lives, and to let them know that we want them to dream, we want them to love animals, we want them to listen to their instincts, and of course we want them to enjoy books and enjoy Torah. I'm now going to turn it over to Rabbi David Ingber, who will introduce our author.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's so good to be with all of you on this end of Shabbat, which is, as I like to think of it, is really not the end of Shabbat, but the beginning of the week. It's Kabbalat Shavua. As much as it's the end of Shabbat, it's also the way that we're also entering into the week. And so what a beautiful way to enter into the week ahead with this beautiful book and with this beautiful story, especially on a Shabbat, where as many of you know, or who were with us earlier in Shabbat, we had a special occasion to have Ramadan and to have a wonderful conversation last night with a representative of an interfaith group, and so powerful to bring different cultures and different traditions together, and even within our own tradition to meet something that we might not have known, which is, I'm sure, what many of us will experience in a moment with this wonderful book. Hopefully many of you have read the book, and if you haven't, hopefully tonight will also inspire you to read the book. And I have the pleasure of introducing the author. Sigal Samuel is an award-winning novelist and a journalist, currently a staff writer at Vox. She previously worked as religion editor at The Atlantic, opinion editor at The Forward, and the associate editor at The Daily Beast. She's also published work in The Rumpus, the BuzzFeed Electric Literature, Haaretz, Tablet, and others. She's appeared on NPR, BBC, and CBC. Sigal earned her MFA in creative writing from the University of British Columbia and her BA in philosophy from McGill University. Originally from Montreal, just so you know, I was the one that wrote hockey player into what I wanted to be as a little kid. Originally from the holy city of Montreal, she now lives in Washington, D.C. The Mystics of Mile End, her debut novel, was nominated at the International Dublin Literary Award. I really want to talk about that too, by the way. Mile End. The Mile End Chavurah. I used to go up to Montreal to be involved, as you know, in the Mile End Chavurah. And you won the Fiction Prize at the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards and the Trade Fiction Book of the Year Award at the Alberta Book Publishing Awards in 2016. And so wonderful to have you, Sarah Chandler, Shamira, the director of the Yeshiva. I'm so happy and proud of this Yeshiva that we have, and so proud to have you here with us within our community, and thanks to Shamira for the energy and passion to bring this together tonight and to be in dialogue with such a remarkable human being, and also who's given us such a gift. Thank you for being with us, Sigal.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So just so everyone knows, our little run of show tonight is we're going to hear from Sigal. We're going to hear a little bit from the book at around, right around a little before 9. We will have our Havdalah ceremony, including our guest musician. I'll say more about him, or you heard him a minute ago, but I'll officially introduce him then, followed by some Kurdish music and then we'll say goodnight. So looking forward to just being together and all these lovely pieces together. So hi everyone. Hi Sigal. Hi David. I want to start by talking about the role of this story becoming a children's book, specifically. In preparation for this event and in talking to, I went to the Wikipedia page of Kurdish Jews, and it mentions Osnat right on the page. It's like one of the first things on the page. So my understanding is this is actually a pretty famous story. It's more of a historical story than a myth. But you felt it needed to be a children's book, and that also was new for you in terms of your writing. And yeah, tell us a little bit about the path to choosing to be a children's book.
Sure. So Osnat Barzani is well known among Kurdish Jews and among Kurds broadly, who are very, very proud of her. Because she became the world's first female rabbi. She was born way back in 1590. So in the 1600s, she became a rabbi and a Rosh Yeshiva in Kurdistan. She was the leader of the Mosul Yeshiva. But the broader Jewish world, I think, does not generally know about her. And when I ask most people, where do you think, if you think like who is the first female rabbi, when and where do you think she sprang up in the world? People usually say 1930s Berlin or 1960s Manhattan. They don't think 1590 Kurdistan. So I wanted like the whole wider Jewish and general world to know the biography of this fascinating historical figure, but it felt especially important to introduce her to kids. I should say there are no books about Osnat Barzani in the world. This is the first book ever published about Osnat for any age, which strikes me as pretty crazy because she's such an important pioneer. And all that exists about her are a couple of scholarly articles or book chapters that, you kind of have to be maybe an academic to have encountered them. So, but it felt especially important to introduce her to kids because I think that like when we're young, we really need to see represented in literature all kinds of people, because the people we see in our books are the people we dream of being able to become. And when I was a little girl, I was growing up Mizrahi. My family is actually from Baghdad, very close to where Osnat was from. And I was growing up Orthodox. And I had a secret dream of becoming a rabbi. Wish I could say I dreamt of being a spy, hockey player, figure skater, all of that. Those are great. I humbly wanted to be a rabbi, but I didn't think that was possible for me, for someone like me, Mizrahi Orthodox girl. If I had known then, if I had had a book then about Osnat Barzani telling me that actually the world's first female rabbi was a Mizrahi Orthodox girl, I think that could have totally changed my notion of what it was possible for me to become. So I kind of hope that this book can do that for the next generation of kids.
One of the things that I loved about the book was that I actually had a chance to read the book with my son. And of course, it's not only is it important, I think, to have next generation, girls being able to see that model, but also for him to ask me, oh, really? The first rabbi, right? Because he sees his father as a rabbi, but really I'm coming, right, in a lineage and where there's more than just male representation is really great for everyone. And so I loved reading the story to him. And so I thank you for that. And I also thank you and wonder about, again, how difficult it was to choose which pieces of the story to a children's book has to obviously be much smaller, much shorter, and more profoundly like conveying very clear messages very clearly. So I wondered about the usage, and I'm sure Shamir will want to speak to this too, of the dove, and the obvious biblical valence to Noah and the peacefulness of the dove, but also I wonder what it represented for you, and how it became a magical, how did that become the vehicle for her miraculous powers?
Yeah. So I think part of the thinking was, what kid doesn't love a pet? What kid doesn't love animals? So I think that element works nicely for a children's book. And it's like one way in which I could bring this story of like a rabbi into the genre, like playing with the genres of children's fiction, which often includes a pet, an animal. But it's not like I made up this dove from thin air. The Kurdish legends about Osnat always talk about her dove. It's really interesting. We have legends and folk tales about Osnat preserved in amulets that Kurdish women have worn for centuries, where they had these scrolls, these tellings about what Osnat did in her life, and a lot of them mention this dove. And I was really fascinated by the sort of like symbiotic friendship between her and the dove. It's said that often she would protect and heal the dove. And you see in the story at one point, the dove gets hurt, gets shot by an arrow, and she manages to heal the dove. What didn't make it into the book is that sometimes the dove also saved her, There's one legend where an intruder was breaking into her house, and she was asleep at night. And just in time, the dove like cooed or made a sound to wake her up, to alert her to the intruder. And she woke up just in time, and she was able, with her sort of mystical powers, to freeze the intruder to the roof beams so he couldn't do any harm. So there's this really interesting way in which the dove is kind of like her mystical sidekick, which I can only say I'm deeply jealous of. I wish I had a mystical sidekick bird too.
Yeah, you mentioned it in the back of the book. You did mention that her father would appear to her in dreams, and would teach her how to escape from dangers, including that one where she froze an intruder in his tracks. I remember reading that, and I'll just pass it over to you, Shamir, but just want to mention how interesting it is that the magic and the dove often in modern magicians usually use some kind of dove trick. So it's kind of an interesting. I was very appreciative of that at that moment, and I also want to just highlight the usage of the father and also of her husband, also as these profoundly important allies in the book that saw her gift and saw who she was, right? Who really saw her, and I really love that too. So, Shamira, yeah.
Thank you so much. So I want to talk about the dreams. It's one thing to I have a pattern of seeing relatives in my dreams, especially my own father who passed away 10 years ago. I sometimes see him in a dream, but it's usually not something important. It's like he's helping me like change a tire or something. It's not always with like the big questions. And I love that in this moment where it's so clear that she's meant to inherit the yeshiva and take on not just these studies from her father, but even from her husband, and that she's able to, again, he doesn't talk to her. It's not like this like big deep voice being like, go to the yeshiva. He just kind of winks at her, and I love his like that connection. And can you say more about her? Maybe the word is skill as a dream worker. I study dream work in a we talked about briefly with Catherine Schoenberg, whose line is through Algiers, and I'm just curious about specifically the role of a female who is teaching but also interpreting dreams.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, I think so just by way of quick background for anyone who hasn't had a chance to read the book yet. So as Rabbi Ingber mentioned, Osnat Barzani's father, Rabbi Samuel Barzani, was a big deal. He was a big macher in the Mosul Jewish world, if you will, to interpolate a very Ashkenazi term there. And he was really, really supportive of Osnat. He didn't have any sons, but he had this one brilliant daughter. He decided to teach her. And they clearly had a really, really close relationship. Scholars have some letters that Osnat wrote. We still have those letters preserved. And in one of her letters, she describes how she grew up. She says, I grew up like a princess of Israel. I never left the house. I never did anything but sacred study. I sat on the lap of my father and learned Torah with him and the scholars. That's all I did. So they had a really, really close relationship. And I think it's no surprise that therefore, after he passed away, she would see him in dreams. And, you can interpret that as you will. I think this book is written almost in a magical realist way, where people who want to interpret things in a magical way can do that. People who want to have more of like the sort of strictly realist or materialist interpretation can do that. But definitely the legends about Osnat talk about her father appearing to her in dreams and continuing to be her teacher in a way, even after he's passed away. So continuing to warn her of dangers, to teach her sort of Kabbalistic spells that she could use to invoke crowds of angels to come help when needed. And I'm actually of two minds about this. On the one hand, beautiful. On the other hand, part of me wonders, is there a sense in which the idea still of Osnat as a female rabbi having this knowledge and wisdom in her just of her own accord is in some way too threatening or strange to the mind, and so we have to have the idea that, oh, it's the father who's teaching her everything, it's the father who's giving her all these ideas and all this wisdom, as opposed to like it's her own wisdom springing up naturally. So I don't know, I think there's a bit of an interesting question there, but regardless, like I think you can read it in multiple ways.
I love like the again, I come back to this nafshi chashka Torah, this notion in our tradition of individuals who have said, that I'm outside of whatever, I'm outside of the box, like I don't fit into that box. And I hate to say it, but in a populist culture, let's say Arya Stark, I know that my friend Eden Sidney Foster will appreciate that. In Game of Thrones, there's like she didn't, she doesn't fit into this box, right? She stands outside of it, and that in some remarkable way, this is the courage to name that, right, and the courage to say that, and the courage to, and of course your book also touches that side of wondering how many thousands of little girls throughout the generations said the same thing, right? But and weren't heard, and that thankfully we're not there anymore, right? Thankfully we're not in that place. I just was very touched by that, and I was also touched by the similarities to some of the Ashkenazi stories, like Chana Rochel of Ludimir, and that great they called her Rebbe, and how in our lineage, in Reb Zalman's lineage, there Chana Rochel Robermacher was somebody that people looked up as a Rebbe. They called her Rebbe. She was a Rebbe, and so I'm just wondering, like for you, when you told this story, how much of it is you too, because you said earlier, that that you had a dream that you had dreamt to be a rabbi yourself, and I wonder if you're going to go to rabbinical school soon.
So I just want to show you when my dad read the book and he saw this. He saw this page, which shows little Osnat when she's a kid, clambering on the bookshelves and then studying with her father. And then he read the whole book. My dad said, you wrote your own autobiography. Because my dad had a very similar relationship with me. My dad is a former professor of Jewish mysticism at a university, and he used to we still do study together Zohar and Luria, all kinds of things, all kinds of Jewish texts, and he was really supportive of me taking on that learning in a very similar way to how Osnat's father supported her. I think it's like impossible to understate the value of having a father or a parent who does that for their kids. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of what made it possible for Osnat to end up in that role that she did. For me, I think although I had that father who was so supportive, I think the countervailing forces when I was growing up were still too strong to make it possible for me to feel like, oh, this is something I can do. To the extent that I was even aware that there were female rabbis, it was always someone who was A, not in the Orthodox tradition, B, who was Ashkenazi. I never saw anyone who looked like me in that role. So yeah, I think if I had known about this 20 years earlier, it could have made a difference. But honestly, I'm very happy now to like be a writer and not a rabbi, because I still feel like as a writer, I get to teach Torah in a way, right? I get to sort of bring these stories to others and kind of engage with it that way.
I have the next question, but David, in case you wanted to comment on that answer. I'll leave an
Go
extra
ahead, go
space.
ahead. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So first of all, wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing. And I think there's even more connections than I thought before in terms of some of those angles and what we're trying to do at Romemu Yeshiva in terms of our faculty and our student body and our long-term plan for, having a place that is open to everyone. And maybe if you can't enroll as a full-time student, maybe you'll take a class since we're on Zoom this year. Some folks on this Zoom know that in just a few weeks, the last week in May, we're launching our next semester of Romemu Yeshiva, and everything's still on Zoom, so you can all access it. So this is my favorite part of the book. Well, actually, when I got to this part, this is my favorite part, except for the part that made me cry, but that's the other part. Anyways, I have like 7 favorite parts, but as folks who have the book and those of you who will have the book soon will see that the artist who illustrated this book is just completely brilliant. And there's this section here that talks about how Osnat loved the shapes of the Hebrew letters and how all the different things that the letters looked like. And, especially in progressive Jewish circles where people haven't gone to yeshiva, people haven't gone to day school in a lot of cases, Hebrew can be really scary. People, I never learned Hebrew growing up, or I never lived in Israel, and, Hebrew is this, I don't understand Hebrew. And in many Jews, pray in Hebrew, but don't know the language. I grew up with a very, very excellent Jewish education in a Reform synagogue where I learned how to read Hebrew, but never learned how to speak Hebrew until I went to college. And I really feel this experience that is described here. I don't know if most children's books have page numbers, but I love that there are no page numbers in this book. For me, being able to stare at a page that has Hebrew and has nothing else on it, just on its own, I find is a mystical experience, and that's something that I want for other Jews, even if they're kind of afraid of Hebrew or they're not yet fluent in Hebrew. We'd like to say at Romemu Yeshiva, there's, Hebrew speakers and, not yet Hebrew speakers as opposed to non-speakers. And I'm wondering if you can say more about this piece and this piece could be its own entire book. And I'll just add, actually, some people already know this, but in a few weeks, Sigal is actually coming back to read the entire book as part of Kabbalat Shabbat with our Shababy, with our family services. And we've already, in the registration form, you'll see we say, dress up as your favorite Hebrew letter or animal inspired by a Hebrew letter. And I just love that, thinking about that. So please.
Yeah, that's my favorite page too. That's my favorite illustration. That page talks about how little Osnat she loves the shapes of Hebrew letters, and she imagines each one as sort of in her imagination, each one resembles an animal or a vine or a plant or something. And that's very much how I related to the language when I was a kid. I grew up very much like immersed in Hebrew. It was a language I knew and I spoke, but I was always like fascinated by the shapes of the letters. And I myself imagined each one as something else. Like the letter Mem, for example, always struck me as a mother with a womb cradling a baby. Just like things I used to imagine. As I grew older and started studying Kabbalah with my dad, I also learned that the Kabbalists really interpreted every letter, the letter Yud, the little thing on the top of the Yud. Every little piece of every letter is deemed to have some deep meaning, deep significance, sort of omni-significance or hyper-significance to every little letter. So I wanted to bring just sort of a little taste of that into the book.
And thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi David in just a second. But as we do that, I want to let folks know that if you want to ask a question, or essentially if you would like me to ask a question on your behalf to our author today, you can type it in the chat to me. But this is the fun part. There's two me's. So make sure. So you want to. I'll sign out of the other one. Zoom is hilarious, right? That you can have two of the same person. Okay, I'm just going to leave that one. Okay, there's now one me. If you would like to ask a question for our author tonight, you can type it in the chat as a private message to me, and I will ask it after this next question or comment from Rabbi David.
Well, thank you. I just want to. I think we all love that obviously that page. I was also intrigued by that she had 7 interpretations for each one, but it didn't say what they were. It just left me. I kept wondering, okay, what were her 7 interpretations for each one? It was so beautiful. I think that the fact that she was called Tanait, which is a really unique term, I think, for a great teacher. The Tanaim are obviously the rabbis of the Mishnaic period, so that's a very early title, and given great authority by later tradition, gives tremendous power to the Tanaim, and to be called a Tanait is like, it's unparalleled. I think. I wonder how, Gaon. It's like it's unique, right?
Right. Yeah. It's funny. I think that's the right way to look at it, as to be called a Tanait, like a Tana, is such high stature, because, even male rabbis who were very revered were never called Tana. That is a title reserved for like the ancient rabbis who were more of a sage than any of us nowadays could be. But it's interesting. A lot of people seem to get really, really hung up on the title thing. And they seem to say, oh, you see, she wasn't a real rabbi. She was just a Tanait, which I think is exactly backwards. To be a Tana, that's like saying, he's not even a medical student. He's just a cardiology chief, right? A chief of department, right? It's like, no, it's backwards. But yeah, I think a lot of people, there's such a sort of visceral thing about this word rabbi and what we're used to that meaning and looking like, that people really struggle with that, and have a hard time believing that anyone called her that. So I try to make it explicit in the book that some people, her students in the yeshiva, called her Tanait, and some people called her rabbi. And we have a really beautiful letter by one of her contemporaries, Rabbi Pinchas Hariri. We have a letter that he wrote to Osnat, asking for her advice and her halachic input. And he opens with the salutation, "My mother, my rabbi." And I loved seeing those two words, like Imi Rabbanati, juxtaposed next to each other, because we never see a juxtaposition like that usually. So I don't know, it was very, very cool to see that manuscript text.
That's remarkable. And do we have her lineage? Like, did she have? The book says that she had children, but do we have her continued lineage? Who are the members of that lineage?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And so she had a few kids, but she had a son, her eldest son. She sent him on to be Rosh Yeshiva in Baghdad, and so carried on a lineage in Baghdad at the time. And still to this day, the Barzani family are a big deal in what is now Iraq. So that Barzani lineage is very much still alive. And I actually just had the serendipitous pleasure of meeting a young woman my age who is a relative of Osnat's, who saw the book and said, "That's like my great grandmother." And so it's really cool. So her descendants very much still, like, the Barzani name means a lot to them, and they're justly proud of it. And yeah, they're very proud of her, and also Kurds who are not Jewish are proud of her.
Sarah, I want to ask one more thing. So about the pilgrimage, well, a couple of things. One is, how do we get our hands on the letters? Have they been translated? Obviously I can read it, but I would love to see the letters, and maybe people would love to see them translated and brought to press. And second question, and then I'm going to let you go and then give it back to to Sarah. Can you tell us a little bit also about the pilgrimage? At the end of the book, you talk about her kever, her grave, and it's such a big thing to go to the Kivrei Tzadikim and Tzadkaniot, and to go. Can you tell us about? Do people know where it is? Is there a way to go there?
So there's some debate over exactly which is her kever. Some people claim to know which is her kever, and if you look online, you can see pictures of it where they've laid sort of like a beautiful tapestry over it, and they've tried to like make it really nice. There is really this tradition, this Hilula tradition in the Sephardic and Mizrahi communities of pilgrimages to grave sites of great righteous people. I don't think that's common that people do that now, because also the safety concerns in the region in recent years. But it's my dream to go one day on a pilgrimage there. I would love that. For your first question about the letters, the scholar who most has done the most work on Osnat Barzani, her name is Renee Levine Melamed. So in her scholarly articles, she reproduces some of Osnat's letters, and they're in Hebrew. So if you read Hebrew, you're in luck. If you don't read Hebrew but you're super curious to know, you could shoot me an email and I can try to translate. But it's a pleasure if you do read it, because you see right away it's a very lyrical Hebrew. She was a poet in addition to being a Talmudic scholar and all of the rest. And you see right away it's full of allusions to Midrash, to Kabbalah, to Talmud. So her learning like really shines through the writing. One day, hopefully, when COVID is all behind us, I would love to go to the National Library in Jerusalem, where they have some of the manuscripts.
Wow. Thank you. So we just have a couple of questions, and then we're going to wrap up, actually, and move into Havdalah and this amazing mini concert. It's thrilling. So I'm going to ask them together because they're a little bit related. So one question is, and I was having a technical difficulty, so it's possible you just answered this, so I apologize, was when is the first time that do you remember when you first heard this story? Because it's so interesting. You mentioned so many times, like in certain communities, everyone's heard of her. And so there was a listener, a member of the Zoom who had that question. And then the other question is, you mentioned studying with your father, and are there other people in your family, other mentors or other people in your family who have, especially when you were young, fit into the picture of supporting and nurturing your talents and love of Torah? Especially, were there any women, or was it actually mostly men or other genders? Yeah.
I'll take that second question first. My grandmother definitely sort of fits that bill. She is a Baghdadi Jew who grew up in Bombay. Very interesting history there. And she, this is a woman who barely has a high school education, right? So not someone who can read Hebrew, read Torah, but was always like very, very supportive of me studying. And she has a sort of like very pure love for the texts. And still to this day, we study the Parsha together every week on Friday on Zoom. So it's very nice to learn with her like that. Nothing beats grandmothers. The other question was about, when did I first hear of Osnat? It was about 5 years ago, completely by accident or fate, however you want to say. I was going deep down an internet rabbit hole one night, like at around 2 a.m. I was doing research for a stage play about Jewish women in history, and stumbled upon this article by the scholar Renee Levine Melamed, which was saying that the first female rabbi was this Osnat Barzani in 1590 Kurdistan. And I was stunned because I had never heard of her. And I asked my friends who are female rabbis, they had never heard of her either. So I thought that this can't stand, right? We need to do something about this. And so that's when I decided to write a kid's book about her.
Wow. All right, we're actually going to move into Havdalah very soon. I just want to ask Rabbi David if he wants to say a few words of closing, and then Sigal, I'll pass it to you to close, and then we're going to go straight into Havdalah.
Well, I just wanted to say that I know that Rabbi Koloresis, our assistant rabbi at Romemu, couldn't be with us tonight, but had she been with us, it would have been remarkable just to hear a bit of her story growing up as a Syrian Orthodox woman in the Syrian community and how she discovered the path to her own calling as a rabbi. And she's a remarkable educator and chachama and like, you know, the stigma of, you know, as it were, coming out as having this calling in a world where that's not accepted as much, and making her way to be the first Syrian Jew to be a conservative rabbi, which is pretty remarkable. And just listening to you and wonder and praying that this remarkable story that you've given, you know, children, has its intended goal, which is to open up the possibilities for those who hear the story, and changing the way that we think about roles and callings and daemon, and that acorn that's in each and every human, and that calls to them. And I thank you for that, Sigal. I was really touched by it, and I hope all of the people who are here and many more visit the West Side Judaica on West 88th Street and Broadway and buy the story, or gift the story and send it, you know, wherever you can, and that hope it gets picked up by by a PJ Library, you know, and that they send it around to all of their people. I think it's remarkable, and I thank you, Sigal, for being with us. And over to you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, just to echo what you said at the beginning, I hope that folks here, you know, see fit to give it to their sons and grandsons just as much as to their daughters and granddaughters and nieces and etc. Because I do think it's important for like all genders and all ages to have that kind of a role model. And also just I like super encourage anyone who's curious to like learn more about Kurdish and the broader Mizrahi Jewish history. There's so much fascinating, rich stuff there. I think if you pour a little bit over the responsa or the texts that Mizrahi rabbis have written, you'll find that by and large they're they have a very tolerant and inclusive worldview that I think actually a lot of Jewry in 2021 has a lot to learn from them. So I hope that this kind of gives you a bit of a spark to want to explore that some more.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sigal. I will thank you again at the end of the event. I'm going to turn the stage over to our musicians to bring us into Havdalah. And everyone here, if you have a candle or grape juice or spices and you want to grab them to make Havdalah with us, if not, we'll have you in mind. And I'll just name, we are going to be led in Havdalah by Chazan Basya Shechter, most of you know, and with Amir? No. And Amir Vahab is going to be playing with her. I'll formally introduce him after Havdalah. And also, we have a special guest zooming in, Michal Biton, who will be doing the blessings for us. Because of this nature of this beautiful presentation, and we want you to be able to see these talented musicians, we're going to be putting the Havdalah blessings in the chat. So if you want to follow along the words, they'll be in the chat. But that's, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to these musicians.
ישועתי, ישועתי אפתח ולא אפחד. כי יחזיר זמניה ויהי לי לישועה, כי יחזיר זמניה אדוני לישועה. ושבת מים בששון בין מעייני הישועה לאדוני הישועה על עמך, על עמך, על עמך בכותל וסלע. צבאות עמנו, בסתיו לנו אלוהי יעקב סלע. צבאות עמנו, בסתיו לנו אלוהי יעקב סלע. לאדוני הישועה, על עמך בכותך, בכותך. צבאות עמנו, משכב לנו אלוהי יעקב סלע. היה צבאות אשרי אדם בוטח בך, אדוני יושיע מלכנו ביום קורנו. ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר, כי תהיה לנו כוס ישועות עשה, ובשם אדוני יקרא, ובשם אדוני יקרא, ובשם אדוני יקרא, ובשם אדוני יקרא.
We're going to bring in a second screen for our Havdalah blessings.
For Michal.
Michal.
All right, it works. Thank you so much for having me. It's so wonderful to be here. Sigal, it's so wonderful to hear more strong Sephardic and Mizrahi women who are sharing so much of our wisdom. And I'll just say that it's very special for me to be here right now after all the darkness from last week, to begin this week together, to give each other strength and give each other light. And also my Saba David, who passed away some years ago, he loved Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai so much, and he loved Lag Ba'omer so much. And he taught me how to do Havdalah. Havdalah would take about an hour. And it was filled with blessings and with food, and it was absolutely stunning and amazing. So I'm going to make the brachot now, and it's not going to be an hour, it's going to be short, but I just, in the spirit of my Saba David and the way that I've always done Havdalah, we do it very participatory. So I'm going to make a lot of brachot, I'm going to make a lot of atzlichenus, which are forms of asking Hashem God to give us success, and everybody should say amen together. And then when I make the blessing on the wine, the Periya Gefen, I'm going to laugh. And I'm going to invite all of us to laugh together because we want to start the week with happiness and with joy. Okay? Kos Yeshuot Esa Ubshem Adonai Yekra. Ana Adonai Yoshiana. Ana Adonai Yoshiana. Ana Adonai Etzlichana. Ana Adonai Etzlichana. Etzlichenu. Etzliach Lerachenu. Amen.
Amen.
Etzliach פרנסתנו, הצליח רפואתנו, הצליח כל ישראל, אחינו, שלח ברכה רווחה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידינו, כדכתיב, יישא ברכה מאת אדוני וצדקה מלוא אישו. ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ויקר, וכתיב ויהי דוד לכל דרכיו משכיל באדוני עמו, כן יהיה עמנו תמיד, בנוח מצא חן בעיני אדוני, כן ימצא חן ושכל טוב בעיני אלוהים באדם. סברי מרנן.
לחיים.
ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא אספה וסמים. ברוך אתה, אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא מאורי האש. ברוך אתה, אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, המבדיל בין קודש לחול, ובין אור לחושך, ובין ישראל לעמים, ובין יום השביעי לשרת ימי המעשה, ברוך אתה, אדוני, המבדיל בין קודש לחול.
אמן.
אמן.
שבוע טוב.
שבוע אל אליהו, בזכות אליהו, הנביא הבן, אל אליהו, בזכות אליהו, הנביא הבן, מרים הנביאה, עוז בזמרת בידה, מרים תקבור איתנו לתקן את העולם, מרים הנביאה, עוז בזמרת בידה, מרים תקבור איתנו לתקן העולם. And the huge Yeshiva Koach, Michal happens to be my neighbor, and our sons play together. And I love going to Havdalah at her house because I cannot tell you how amazing it is to have the laughter as part of the separation between the sweetness of Shabbat and the rest of the week. And sometimes with the kids fighting in the background, but it's all really great.
So I'm just going to introduce you and then we'll get started. Wow. What an amazing evening we have already had, and we still have more to come. Again, Yashar Koach, thank you everyone for your lovely participation. Shavua Tov. And I'm going to introduce our guest artist, our second guest artist for the night. We had a writer and now we have a musician. And Amir Vahab I'm going to read his bio, but before I read his bio, I want to say Amir Vahab is our neighbor, and he's actually played at Romemu before. He lives just around the corner from Romemu, and in addition to being,
I just want to say the last time he was here, the last time he was at Romemu, was the night that my wife's water broke, and he was playing at Romemu. Remember that, Chazan Shechter? It was the night that Or Zalman came into the world. So I just want you to know that was the last time we saw him at Romemu. Amazing. That won't happen tonight, but I'm just thanking you.
So he's no stranger to Romemu, and he is also runs a music school, and one of the students who has studied in his school is Hazan Basia. So even if you've never heard of him, you have all experienced his amazing teaching through our wonderful Hazan and for many years at Romemu and for many more years to come. I will read his bio, but you should know that his website, tanbour.org, TANBOUR.org, is a place to find him. Maybe you want to take lessons, maybe you want to take drumming lessons, maybe another instrument. We're going to hear, I think, at least 3 different instruments from him tonight, and is an amazing opportunity to not just hear this musician, but he is an educator. The New York Times calls him the ambassador for silenced music. Honored as a peacemaker and virtuoso, Amir Vahab is a composer, vocalist, and lecturer, specializing in a wide variety of traditional Persian instruments. And he is noted for his expertise in Persian culture and history and for the spirituality present in his music and teachings. Amir has been described as one of the world's most revered players and composers of Persian folk music, and he is the leader and principal player for the Amir Vahab Ensemble. We are so lucky to have not only Amir playing with us live tonight, but playing with our very own Hazan Basia. You are all in for a treat. He is going to be singing in Kurdish, and he's going to be telling us a little bit about what he's going to be singing about before he begins. I'll now turn the stage over to you, Amir.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much. I'll bring this a little bit lower so you can see the instrument as well. Before I forget, I'd like to thank Basia and Sarah, who had kindly invited me to join you, and for their invitation and collaboration. And I see several familiar faces. As you heard, I have been collaborating and really uniting our hearts in prayers with Romemu. And but especially David, it's been a while since we saw each other, and I'm certainly looking forward to reconnect. Tonight, as you heard, we will be doing some Kurdish songs. These are from different regions. As you know, Kurdistan has three major parts. I guess the biggest one is in Turkey, and then a second biggest part, about 15 million, in Iran. And then Iraq would be the third largest. And they have more here and there in Syria, even Russia, Armenia. They scattered. So all of the songs I've chosen are love songs. And you know, happy occasion special, basically, to celebrate this beautiful gathering. Without further ado, I start with our first song. Also say a couple of words about the instrument. This is called a saz. It's a long neck lute. And this is actually Basia's instrument. I am borrowing. It sounds very good. And we're going to play, hopefully at the very end, we're going to play the reed flute. I would say a few words about that as well. The reed flute is very special because first and foremost, it's not a man-made instrument. It's made by God. People found it in the nature, just a broken reed, and then they started blowing into it, and then throughout the millennia, I say millennia because already King David is said to play, amongst many other instruments, played the reed flute, ney. And actually the Persian ney is, unlike the Turkish ney, is modeled after King David ney, and has seven joints or seven phalanges. So 7 joints and 7 sound hole. As you know, the number 7 in many of the traditions, spiritual tradition, comes as a spiritual sign, like the 7 archangels, 7 layers of skies, 7 days of creation. I heard somebody saying 7-Eleven. I don't think that's part of it. No, that was my joke. So was I allowed to joke? I'm told that I'm allowed to joke. Okay, so well, that's so much for the reed flute. And of course the frame drum, which again goes back millennia. It is certainly said by the ethnomusicologists that it is a Middle Eastern frame drum, and Alexander the Great, 2,500 years ago when he was there, he brought it to Europe, and from that point on, it started propagating to the rest of the Europe. So without further ado, we're going to start with our happy songs. Unite your hearts with us, and we will sing for you. So. Well, thank you again. Once again, I'd like to thank our hosts, Basia and Sarah, for their kind invitation and collaboration. And our love and blessings to all of you that are watching. May this difficult time pass soon, and hopefully better days are ahead. One good thing that I have discovered during the past 14 months is that we all get to reevaluate our lives and to reflect, to see what are the things that are more important to us. I think good friends and family and priorities, we find what are really the more important things in our lives. So for me, definitely good friends and family and music. So blessing to all of you. Give it back to Sarah again.
Thank you so much,
Sure.
Amir. Thank you so much, Khazan Basia. We're about to say goodnight, if you can believe it. And I'm just going to say a few last words to close out the night. We have some slides that will also have the same words that I'm saying on them. First of all, some of you heard this before, but I want to make sure everyone knows, and we can put the registration link in the chat. We are going to have Sigal back at a time that is more available to the littles on Friday, May 21st. So that's the Friday after Shavuot. It's about 3 weeks away. And Sigal will be here reading the Osnat and Her Dove book, the entire book, live on Zoom, and everyone's invited. That's going to be Friday, May 21st. So if you don't have the book, you have time to get it and then come to that live reading. Or you could send it to a relative who you can't reach because they're far away, but you could come to the event together and then you could both have the book. So we hope to have you back for that. And we have upcoming our next semester of Romemu Yeshiva, a 3-week immersive program. You can have the option of studying with us full-time or part-time. Full-time students can get a $500 living stipend, and we have many part-time opportunities, including 15 different courses. So definitely check out that link and check out all the classes. And also in June, Rabbi David and I, as well as a number of other amazing, amazing teachers, will be leading an in-person retreat at Isabella Friedman Jewish Retreat Center. That registration will open this week, and you can get a link to more information also in that same link at the bottom, romemu.org/announcements. And a bunch of other great upcoming programming happening here at Romemu. It's still the Omer. Oh, we should count the Omer. We're going to count the Omer, but there's also the Womer, which is on Sundays. The next one is going to be tomorrow, so check that out. Some really beautiful teachers, including Kohenet Eliza Rivka, who's one of our behind-the-scenes folks tonight. And we also have the Romemu clothing drive and community kitchen, so if you are in the city, we could actually see you in person tomorrow, May 2nd. This is also very exciting if you enjoy Khazan Basia's music and you want more, not just on Shabbat, but even more. We have Khazan Basia as well as Mandy Patinkin and Modi will be our featured entertainment for the Romemu benefit happening on Tuesday, May 25th. It's going to be really fun. It's going to be really short. So if you love to access great entertainment and to celebrate Romemu, and you're thinking, I don't want to be on Zoom for 3.5 hours. It's gonna be short and simple and sweet, and I'm personally excited for Mandy Patinkin. Though Pharaoh's Daughter is gonna rock as well. And we're just gonna wrap up to thank once again our author Sigal Samuel. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's such an honor to have you in our community. Of course, it would have been so great to have you in person, but then you would have had to be on the train, and we probably couldn't have had a Havdalah and all those things. So we're just so glad we got to do it on Zoom. And Amir, we'll just wave one more time. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for schlepping to Basi's apartment to be with us tonight. It was such an honor, and I can't wait to hear more of your music. And finally, a reminder, in case you missed the 10 other times we said it, please buy this book. I actually want to really thank West Side Judaica. Those of you who don't live in New York City might not be familiar with it. This is a Jewish bookstore on Broadway between 88th and 89th Street. And they bought 180, that's a good number, 180 copies of this book in anticipation of these two events. And we would love them to call us and say, sorry, we sold them all. You can buy them two ways. One is you can buy them through us on the registration form for May 21st. And we can mail it to you, or you can pick it up. You can also just call them, that number on your screen. You can also just walk in. Remember stores? You can just walk up to the store, pay money. They do not have a web store, but you can also email sales@westsidejudaica.org. And Noach is probably not listening now, but Noach, who's one of the booksellers there, thank you for all of your hard work getting those books in stock. And even if you don't live in New York City, but you want to, give this book to someone anywhere, they do ship anywhere in the country. And we would love to support them. We would love them to sell out those 180 copies. A few dozen have already been sold. And finally, I want to thank Eliza Rivka and Evie for being our Zoom gabais tonight and holding us and keeping everything organized. This was not a simple event to pull off. And thank you everyone for coming. And
thank you for Sarah Chandler. It's dizzy. I'm going to take off the reverb for a second. It's dizzying to see the incredible way she can hold an entire event, all the pieces, and also host and to interview and to be here with us. And so I just want to think that everybody should give her a huge because it's literally incredible, and we're completely blown over right here. So
thank you, Chazan Basia, and thank you to my mom for coming. And I want to wish everyone a Shavua Tov, and we're gonna say good night. Oh, we're gonna count the Omer before we're gonna count the Omer. Do you want to sing? Oh, we have some extra singers. Here we go.
Take out your drums, everybody, wherever you are. Your drums at home or your tables.
Shasvirata Omer, Shasvirata Omer, Shasvirata Omer, Sheva Shabbatot, Temimotiena, Sheva Shabbatot, Temimotiena. Ya da 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 ya ya da da ya da da ya 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 da ya da da ya 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 da ya da da ya 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 da Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ruach haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu Asvirata Omer, Asvirata Omer, Asvirata Omer, Asvirata Omer, Hayom Shloshim v'chamisha yamim, shehem arba'a shavuot v'shlosha yamim la'omer.
A little more, a few more days.
Malchut Shebehud Yadadai 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 Yadadai
Tov, Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Sei gesund. Gott von Avram, von Yitzchak, von Yaakov, from the other tradition, sorry. Vahinta Volk, the Al Besen, the Al Velv, the Liebe Shabbos Kodesh Keita Weg. Leila Tov.